Welcome to Try This at Home. I'm Cliff Bumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
This week we are talking about Mythbusters Season 1, Episode 8. Our myths are Hammer Bridge Drop, Buried Alive, and Cola. No real dramatic way to build up to that, it turns out.
No, it's just stuff with cola.
And do you know what is special, at least for us, about this episode?
Buster return?
We are halfway through Season 1.
Oh, wow.
There are 16 episodes in Season 1. This is Episode 8. We are halfway through the first season of Mythbusters.
Wow, it took half the season to get to an episode I didn't like.
Oh,
that's right. A little hook.
A little bit of a tease. Well, before we get there, this episode dropped on October 24th, 2003 originally, and it was, of course, directed by Peter Reese. Next up is overall thoughts, and you just kind of gave us a teaser, so go right ahead.
It's good entertainment. It is a worthwhile episode. I was repulsed by most of it for various reasons. And
That's a strong word.
Oh, absolutely. What, Cliff? Come on now. One of them was buried alive. You're just fine with that. Well, I guess there. I gather. There is enough of an audience for the concept of being buried alive to sustain a Ryan Gosling movie. No. I do this all the time. Ryan
Reynolds.
Yeah. Thank you. And it doesn't make sense. I think that's why I confuse it with that one. Ryan Reynolds.
Deadpool was buried alive.
Oh, yes, he was. I didn't watch it, but people did. Not something I'm interested in. I especially since they're like, can you survive? And it's just like, I don't care. I don't try it. Again, good entertainment.
Yeah.
I perfectly worthy of their time and efforts. Just to be, I was like, oh no, don't do that.
So here's where I'm going to surprise you. I agree with you.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, I will say I did not hate this entire episode.
Okay.
I really like the hammer drop myth, and we'll get there.
I did too.
I like that myth quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my general note for this episode, since we got through the pilots, there have not been a lot of episodes. You know, we talked so much during the pilots about, oh man, it really feels like they're finding the show and they're figuring out, and the show doesn't know what it is yet. Since we got into the main first season, like legit first season episodes, I haven't felt that.
No.
Until this one. This is the first one where I just felt like, oh, they're trying to figure some stuff out here and it's not hitting. And because it's not the pilots and we've been used to the show being the show now for the last, like, what would that be? The last 5 episodes or whatever. It made this one feel a little bit worse. And this is actually the first time, I think, that I've had some like producer brain notes about an episode of the show of just not understanding, not talking about methodology, not talking about testing and process, from a television show standpoint. There's some things in this episode that really baffled me.
Okay.
So I was worried that the show was getting so good we would not have anything to talk about. So I'm actually glad.
That's fair.
I'm actually glad and excited to dig into it. Myth 1, buried alive. So typically, Harrison's favorite myth. Typically, I would start this by explaining what the question of the myth is, but I actually wanted to put it to you. At the beginning of this, did you even understand what they were testing for?
Not at all.
No, same.
Especially since I don't know that I am familiar with that many stories of people. Like, it's not something I've ever taken seriously. Certainly, I've heard of it,
right?
You know, but like in like the bells on the ground, it's like, that's a fun motif and all that. Yeah. But like, I don't know that I've ever thought like, could somebody seriously survive? It's like, no, like if you get buried alive, then you're just gonna be dead pretty soon. Like,
well, and I thought by the end, and I'm jumping way ahead here, but by the end, they do actually, when they're talking about whether or not the myth is busted, it's the first time I felt like they explained that what they were really testing was this idea that someone could be buried alive and live long enough for that fact to be found out, whether they're exhumed and they're still alive, or they're exhumed, they ring a bell, or they, whatever.
Yeah.
That was what it seems like they were actually testing was, can you live long enough after being buried alive? Because, I mean, they do say at the beginning, obviously people can be buried alive, and I'm sure they have, unfortunately. But yeah, I very much agree. And my overarching feeling with this myth is one of those things. They did this to get the scene of Jamie being buried alive.
Oh, totally.
And which is captivating. Like that sequence actually was quite like pulse increasing.
It was the most genuinely nerve-wracking moment the show has had, where I was like, I'm no longer having fun.
Yeah,
that was really like the reaction where I was like,
it reminded me of, there were a lot of shows I feel like back then when television was still, there was no YouTube, right? We've talked about this before, and it was still like, there were some things you just put on TV because you knew people would watch it because it was exciting in some way or weird, and you didn't have to have a good story around it. It was just, watch this stunt. And this is really the first time in the show where I felt like Mythbusters has dipped into that territory of, they did this, it feels like they did this so that they could cut a promo and air it on Discovery Channel of, this week, Jamie buried alive, and try to get some, and frankly, television's weird. I don't blame them for doing that.
No.
I mean, that would become the Ice Road Truckers model.
Yeah, exactly.
Of like every commercial break, somebody's about to die and then they're fine. Like,
it's so, I mean, the fact that they're not like frequently playing the card is very nice. But even, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that now that they have played it, I was like, I don't know that I liked that very much. Especially since like, there were just things that I thought they could have tested for that would have been more interesting. Like, can you escape being buried alive? You know, like, let's give every fighting chance. Let's get the strongest. Like, just because everything where they're like, we're gonna get a standard issue coffin. We're gonna play it very by the books. Like, I don't like this. This isn't gonna.
I'm so glad you said that, because that actually is kind of the first place where my producer brain thing came in. And I'm trying not to judge the show by what it would do later and know how good it would get. That's not a fair way to judge this. But I did think about, if this myth was done probably even 2 or 3 seasons later, I don't know, we'll find out how long it takes to get to this sort of methodology. But the thing would have been centered around, okay, this is a ridiculous question. However, there's some cool science we can play with.
Yeah.
When you seal a casket.
Like the window.
Exactly. The leaping lawyer.
The leaping lawyer.
So like, okay, you seal a casket. How much air can a casket contain? How long can a human being survive with that air?
Yeah.
These kind of things.
Theory stuff.
Exactly. And one of the thoughts that I had, one of the big holes in this that I just kept going, when are they going to talk about it? When are they going to talk about it? And they never did. They never mentioned vaults. They never mentioned the fact that the type of casket that they bought does not go in the ground and have dirt put on top of it. Not in the United States, at least.
Wait, did they mention that specifically?
No, never.
How do you know this?
What, about vaults?
Yeah. Just no. This like type of
I mean,
coffin.
I'm saying it was a modern metal casket, and if you're talking about a casket that, or what would have been a coffin that would just went in the ground and had dirt on it, you'd be talking about an old wooden like cowboy coffin,
right?
Which this myth does have some ye olde vibes to it. So that was one of my thoughts too. Is like, okay, get a wooden coffin, dump dirt on it, see when it would break, right?
Yeah. Put Buster in there,
right?
Don't go in there.
Make the point of like, oh, we could never do this with a wooden coffin, even though it's probably what would have been used. But no, they had a modern coffin from a modern funeral home, which is, today we use vaults. That coffin would never just have a ton of dirt thrown on top of it. That's why it buckles. It's not made for that, So they never went into any of that stuff. And I felt like there were so many steps along the way that they could have walked you through to then get you to the point of, it's kind of that it would be the buried alive version of, okay, this thing didn't blow up, so let's pack it with C4, right?
Yes.
We're going to get to the thing you want to see, which is one of us being buried alive. We know that that's like the hook. So we're going to do that. But before we get there, we're going to walk you through why that doesn't work and why the instead, it was just one test that doesn't work because of course it's not going to work. And that's a myth.
Yeah, it especially since, like you said, it's first of all, it's going straight to, okay, we're putting ourselves in harm's way. It's like, no,
Right.
that's usually the last resort. I mean, like, it is funny and all, but like this time there's so many different, like, if I can think of ways to approach this that don't immediately involve burying one of you two, I know you did as well. You know, so I mean, it almost feels, I don't know this, but it feels very producer mandated.
It does.
Because it's just like this one doesn't involve that much like science or like, I mean, this is definitely the most prominent appearance of the folklorist, but in this episode at least. But it's not, I don't know. I don't like, I mean, it's fun when they are in danger. But there something about the controls make it a little more fun, you know, to see that just like completely go away and be like, oh, Jamie's in trouble. Like not like tee-hee, like later when they're like on the crane.
Exactly.
Like, oh, tee-hee. Like,
that was way funnier
like, no,
and
you're
more
belayed.
fun.
Like you're fine. You know, even if they fell, they would be fine. Like this was a genuine like, please get him out of there.
Yeah.
Please get him out of there.
Yeah. And
as soon as possible.
Your point about it feeling produced is interesting because it does raise the question, like this was season 1. So the show is not a hit yet.
Right.
For 8 episodes in. It's not, at least not what it would become. Right. So I wonder how much involvement Discovery had at this point. I wonder how much involvement. I wonder if Adam and Jamie, I haven't even paid attention in the credits. Like, are they producers yet? They would become producers. They would become, 2 of the major creative forces on the show. But has that happened yet?
Yeah.
So it is interesting. I would love to know, was this the kind of thing where Discovery's like, hey, can you bury somebody alive? Because we think we could sell that. It would help the show.
Or I mean, it feels very like boardroom. Someone spitballing is like, and maybe you guys get buried alive. It's like, that's one we could do, I guess. Like
no bad ideas in a brainstorm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we should walk through it a little bit because even though we're talking about the overall issues, there were some pretty great moments throughout. I thought my the first thing that I liked was, as you mentioned, the folklorist Dr. Witham is all over this episode, and she starts by telling a story about a woman being buried alive and the fingernails getting pulled back and all this, and then they cut from her immediately to a church. And it's just the biggest like cut to Brother Guire Cleary, who are
just the absolute strangest transition, not the least of which because, and I do wonder, what date did you say this came out?
October 2003.
I was right. It's a Halloween episode.
That may explain some things.
No, it totally was. Like that was like the down to the music being like creepy.
The like lightning flash thing that happened.
Man, did you notice? Yes. Classic weaning.
You just needed a witch in the background.
Yeah, exactly. A little cackle. But like, did you notice that during that story she was telling, very softly, weird mixing on this audio?
Yeah.
They were like doing audio from the story she was telling.
Yes.
So like a woman like screaming and like a scratching noise, but like so softly that I was like, am I imagining that?
It was like one of those Halloween sound CDs that you would get at Kmart growing up.
That is just like playing on the loop in a haunted house that is actually Bill's mom's apartment, and those are peel grapes. I'm sorry to tell you, they're not real eyeballs. If this is the place that you found out about Bill's mom's lies, I'm so sorry.
Our guy, Brother Guire Cleary, which I just love that name. I want to steal that name and put it in something because it's so good. I did love like,
and we're talking like Friar.
Yes,
like he is in like full like cosplay.
Yeah,
except for the haircut.
Where's Robin Hood, my man? Is what I kept thinking looking at this guy.
Lil Jon-esque.
Well, they cut from Dr. Witham being so, and she's great.
Friar Tuck.
Yes.
I know Robin Hood. Go on.
I love how animated Dr. Witham is. She is great at this. And she's like telling the whole story and she's going into everything. And they cut to him and his line was, that's a story from overheated Gothic writers. I love that line.
So specific and so much with a feeling that no, you had prep time.
Yes. It was like he had heard her. It was like he was like talking crap about her.
Like had just watched the clip.
Yes.
They like put a pre-iPad in front of him and it's just like, not at all.
Yeah.
No. Nonsense. Utter nonsense. Who is this gothic lady?
I loved it. It is completely ridiculous. I thought they go back. You mentioned that Dr. Witham's all over this myth, and they go to a doctor at one point and back to the friar. And then
the doctor says effectively what I did, which is that like, well, sure, as a child I heard this, but then I grew up. Is basically what he said.
It is what he said. Did you notice when they're talking to the doctor, it starts with like they have like one of those, you know, kind of classic TV shots of like the outside of the building, like the doctor walking down the hall.
Yeah.
Then it cuts to an interview with him. And then they cut out to a wide, and Jamie is laying on the like prep table with his shirt wide open, just hairy chest out, and it's never referenced.
No.
Clearly they shot a scene of like his vitals being taken, and that got cut.
Right.
And all that got left in was just shirtless Jamie lounging on the table.
Right. So, I mean, it's just like Jamie's chest's time to shine, and the whole scene got dropped. So it's just in the background now.
There was a lot of Adam and Jamie's skin in this episode.
I don't want to say too much, but it was
Can't have too much.
every myth except one. So, you know, that's a lot.
There was another, like, we always talk about our Adam and Jamie just as delightfully strange human beings. There was one of those moments when they're shopping for the casket. And I just had the thought of, like, how many people, I know it happens. I know people make funeral arrangements before they pass. Sure. But how many people have, A, picked out their own coffin, their own casket, or B, commented on the gauge of their casket steel?
I think that's the one.
That's the real rarity in this bunch.
Yes, because hypothetically, wouldn't make much of a difference, would it? I mean,
Right.
you know, that'd be swell if it held up, but if it doesn't, fine.
Well, again, feels like a good time to mention that all caskets are put in giant concrete vaults.
Well,
Like, I couldn't believe that never made it into this story.
that does feel incredibly surprising to me that it wouldn't, especially since it's like, oh, but you're begging for trouble.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't made for this. Anyway, I don't want to rag on that too much because I pulled a clip that I love. So they buy a casket, they put it in a pickup truck, drive it through San Francisco. Probably not the weirdest thing anyone in San Francisco saw that day. It's a wonderful place.
Exactly. Even that hour.
Yeah, even that hour. Or on this show, to be fair. And then they have to test it, and they get Jamie in with the camera and everything else, and they close it. And they ask Jamie how he's doing in this. And he says,
Fine, I'm just kind of thinking about sex a lot.
I mean, obviously, I caught that the first time. In fact, the reason I didn't text you that is I was like, there's like a 2% chance he doesn't already have it queued.
The thing I didn't realize until just hearing it in my headphones is the first half is over the radio, and then it cuts to his voice on the words thinking about sex a lot. And it's so strange. I'm going to one more time.
Fine, I'm just kind of thinking about sex a lot.
It's like he goes through puberty halfway through it. His voice just drops.
It's pretty great, especially since like he knows that's going on television.
I know.
It's just, what's the most ridiculous thing you can say?
Anytime Jamie busts out something like that, it's like extra rare and special and wonderful.
It is because I believe him, and I'm also like not off put by it.
No,
you know, it's like, well, I mean, you're getting buried alive. Think about whatever gets you through it, dog. That's fine.
Whatever you need.
Very calm, very measured. Like, sexual relations are on the mind. It's like, all right. Yeah, that's healthy. That's fine. It kind of balances out the unhealth of getting buried alive clip.
Don't know if we've hit that. Yeah, there's a lot
It's alive.
Yeah.
Jamie.
I mean, I guess how better to feel alive? right?
Yeah.
That is
I can think of a few ways.
that is as alive as
including sex.
That's as alive as a Heinemann gets, is laying in a casket thinking about sex.
Something very Dwight Schrute-esque.
This
about. Especially when he's like commenting on like the frills inside.
Yes. Yeah.
I am interested if it's comfortable. They didn't like really touch on that. And if it is comfortable, why? Yes. Now we're asking the real questions.
See, that could have been more of the myth that they could have unpacked.
That could, be like, coffin shops are lying to you. They make it comfortable for you to get in. But is it really comfortable once you're dead?
They did keep cutting
tonight on Mythbusters. It is really fun. The I should have gotten you to pull just like a clip of the narrator, because his tone doesn't change, but he's talking about such, and it's like, Jamie is going to get buried alive. Like, oh.
Yeah, not sure that's the tone, my man.
Yeah. Come on in.
It's a little chipper.
The water is buried alive.
It reminds me a few episodes ago when he was just like, when Buster got messed up and he was like, well, Buster wasn't made for this. He was made to test car crashes. It's like, oh, what?
He was made for pain.
His existence is pain. They kept cutting around here to various other interviews and going back and forth. And that was when I just made the note, like, it feels like they're stretching. That was when I really started to feel like there's no more methodology here. They're just doing the thing and filling time.
We got to the first commercial break and it was like, after the break, Jamie gets buried. It's like, really?
Okay. Yeah. Straight away.
This is the main bag, I guess.
And we'll come back to this when we get to the cola myths. But in the cola myth, we get a first that we have talked about before. We think we talked about it all the way back at the pilot, which is the myths being intercut, where they cut away and they go, we'll come back to this later on. And they cut away. And I was like, this is that producer brain moment I was talking about earlier. I was like, if you're going to cut away from something and hold it to the end and like make an out where you got to drag the audience through the show, do it with the buried alive thing, not
the
cola, not
totally.
Teeth in It was so weird. It was like the whole pitch of this episode is somebody's gonna get buried alive, and that's over in like 13-15 minutes of an hour-long show. It was very strange.
I mean, I guess kudos to them for giving the people what they want, but it I don't know, it was not uphill from there.
Well, it did. I will say the actual...
Except the hammer one can stay.
And the actual Jamie getting buried sequence did deliver. Like we said, it was intense. It was captivating. It was... I mean, Jamie's in this thing, and he later describes how when they're putting the dirt on, he can just hear it crushing like a tin can around him. He said that he
could see it as well.
Yeah, and dirt starts coming in through the casket. He mentions at one point, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about this, that he was worried that the casket lid was going to twist sideways, in which case all the dirt would just hit him. Oh my, like, the whole thing is just terrifying.
I don't love it, and I don't really want him to be a part of it. Put Buster in there, please. Because it also means that like this whole segment lasts 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe less. But I mean, again, it's very tense. It makes for good entertainment. But I mean, we ultimately, it's doomed to fail.
Yeah.
You know, it's like next up, they'll take this boat full of holes out to sea. And then they like don't get past the surf. And it's like, wow, how about that? It's like, I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I expected that.
Yeah. Why did you put sharks in the water for that? That doesn't... It's more dangerous than it had to
be. It would be like if they had put the poodle in the microwave in the other episode. Like,
that's a really good point. That's a really good
like
point.
what else do you think is going to happen?
Let's see how hot it can get. It's like, I mean, probably not very.
Yeah,
I don't. There was a part of me that wondered if it was staged, but I don't think they'd do that.
What with do you mean the buried alive?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
like the whole thing hinged on the fact that like we're really doing this. Yeah. Oh, we can't do this. We can't do this. This can't and shouldn't be done. Okay, all right.
I mean, I don't think it was
extra disclaimer up top.
I don't think it was staged, but I do think they knew. I mean, just as we're saying, they knew what was going to happen.
Yeah,
they knew. Oh, this is going to be. This is probably not going to work, and we're just building this up. I would assume.
But let me tell you. If they wanted fireworks, like reaction-wise, should not have picked the man of cold hard rock.
Yeah.
I mean, just like...
If you're pitching this episode and you got Adam and Jamie and you're thinking, who's going to be funnier to bury alive?
Yeah.
Adam, right?
Well, now, when you say it like that, in theory, it's definitely Jamie. Because
but he's a stone cold killer, man.
Oh, but that's the thing, is that the joke is to see if even this will crack him. And the fact that it just like failed to do so miserably, despite the fact that they're like hyping it up repeatedly. Like, oh, he's so nervous. And it's like, no, he's not.
How
he's
could
thinking
you
about
tell?
sex. He's doing all right, actually, considering that pounds of soil are coming down upon him and into his vessel.
Yeah.
Inside. Pretty quickly this happens.
He's way more like visibly bothered later on the crane.
Oh, by far.
In terms of like actually being like, screw this, get me down, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Like he was buried alive. Like, oh, didn't work. You know, it was like as much as we get.
Yeah.
He's like, I was freaking out pretty bad back there. I was like, you were not, sir. We have the audio of the moment. Please.
That's the last one we're doing.
Because I can feel it coming in.
You want out? Roger that. We're going to get you out.
That is the most monotone way to be like, oh, good. I'm glad this is over because, well, as a matter of fact, the entire structural integrity has been compromised. And golly, I'm just covered in dirt. Like, you're what?
If you wouldn't mind grabbing a fire extinguisher, my leg is currently on fire. It would be nice of you.
That would actually be swell for me if you could just put that out real quick.
Jamie missed his calling as like a 911 operator. Just cool as a cucumber under pressure.
Or like a hostage negotiator. You know? I mean, there's like a Michael Shannon-esque quality to just like, he could just keep it level.
I flash back to previous episodes when Jamie has just antagonized Adam to do something painful. I'm not sure that Jamie as a hostage negotiator is going to end well for anybody, particularly if the hostage is Adam.
If the hostage is Adam, obviously it's different.
Shoot, I dare you.
Yeah. You won't. I'm looking at you. It doesn't look like a trigger finger to me. I grew up on a farm. I know a trigger finger. I love him so much.
I know.
He's just a special person.
Wonderful, wonderful weirdo. It's so good.
He's delightful.
They do ultimately say that this myth is busted, and we went into all this at the beginning, that this is where they actually talk about what they're testing for,
right.
And it just, my note was, man, it feels like they could have laid that out better. Like, this is the thing about this, is I don't actually have a problem with this myth overall as an interesting thing to explore. No different than we talked about with the leaping lawyer. Mm-hmm. The myth itself, maybe not that interesting, but you can make it something out of your methodology and the scientific principles you pull out of it. And you get the danger and you get those moments. I can totally see this getting thrown on a whiteboard and it being like, that's something we've got to do. That's great television.
Yeah.
It's just the way it's laid out in this episode and the way they actually did it. Mm-hmm. I want to experience Adam and Jamie redo this. And I don't know if they do. Maybe they revisit it at some point. I don't know. But
great.
Yeah, I would love to see this with a little bit more Mythbusters polish on it at some point down the road.
Not because I want to see Jamie in further danger. I want to see less of that. I want to see more, Buster in danger. That's fine.
And to that point, it being this early in the show, things do still feel a little slapdash. I think that's part of what makes it feel as dangerous as it did. Is it kind of just feels like, oh, these are some dudes doing this in a parking lot.
Yeah,
like it
with
doesn't.
2 EMTs on standby and everyone shaking their head.
Yeah. Like, what are they? By the way, what are the EMTs going to do if this man is crushed by all this dirt in a coffin? If he is like crushed in a giant soda can, what are these couple of dudes standing there with an oxygen tank gonna do?
I wonder how many shows are out there that were just like ended before they began because something like this just went horribly awry.
Oh,
Gotta be a small handful.
probably.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't heard of them. I think that's kind of the point.
They're in a vault somewhere. We're never gonna find out.
Yeah, some producers just like,
If only they'd
Maybe a
had that
director
vault
cut.
for this freaking myth.
And he's still alive.
Did it do anything, or is that all my imagination?
Oh, it definitely was crushing it in.
Myth 2, Cola is how it's listed on IMDb, but I like their title better in the episode, which was 101 uses for cola. So
Yeah.
just the idea here, this is a lot
well,
like...
there's 10. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, the others didn't make the cut. The others didn't make the cut.
Off.
This is a lot like the microwave myths we had a couple episodes ago, where it's just a bunch of mini myths crammed into one. And I like that. I like that format. I think it's kind of fun, and you get, you know, these sort of mini tests. My biggest note on this myth off the top, or this whole sequence of myths, was they did thankfully use Mythbusters brand cola.
They did.
So they spared our poor Australian editor from having to blur dozens of cans over the course of this episode.
And it appeared to be a tall boy at that.
It did, right? Yeah. That was a big ass can of soda.
That was a large can.
Yeah.
This was one of the few times that, well, I probably could have looked it up to confirm, but I'm fairly certain this is true. They were like spitballing about something. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, I know that one. I know the myth. It was
nice.
about it was in the washing the Coke, or
Washing
the blood. I mean, it's not less ridiculous to say washing the blood with Coke. I mean, that's still a silly sentence, but they like set up a whole crime scene and they did like a chalk outline.
Yeah.
And Jamie was like, did you know it's a myth?
Oh,
like, they don't actually do their chalk outline. I'm like, I know this. That's
really?
kind of true.
I thought about that at the time, and I meant to research and didn't, so I'm glad you have this knowledge.
Huzzah. They did it in instances where the victim was still alive and needed to be hospitalized. So it was like something that would be done before the EMTs got there to move the person, not yet a body. But they like, if there was some chance that they could like survive, then they would.
Are we talking like before photography was readily available kind of thing? As like, hey, we need to get a position and we need to get this information recorded?
Something like that. I don't know when it fell out of like popular use, but I definitely know that that's why it's not every time. It makes for a great visual. They even comment on that in the show.
Yeah, I just thought it was like Saul Bass, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there. So it's like one of those things where it's like there is a kernel of truth there, but it's not something that would happen all the time. And you certainly, like a lot of time, you'll see a body laying in the chalk, and it's like, oh, never. Like that's just that is pure fiction.
Yeah,
but
yeah, very interesting. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that.
Oh, you're what? That's the first and last time I'm going to bring research. You're the research boy.
So there's a lot of myths here. We'll walk through them as we go, just kind of the high points. But my overall thought with all of these cola myths, I thought it was interesting for the most part, but I wish that I kept waiting for them to explain why.
Why anything?
Why this is supposed to work. They get there when they finally get to the Rusty Bolts part. There's the first time they mention the acid content of a soda and how that could have some effect. And I was like, I wish there had just been a minute-long sequence of here's what's in a soda, and here, you know, it has corrosive properties, it has acidic properties, here's why this could potentially work, and like front load that, because I'm looking at my notes for the cleaning up blood myth and the polishing chrome myth. I would write verdict, cola helped. Why? Verdict works. Again, why?
Yeah.
Because there was no discussion of
It was
that
just
at
like,
all.
oh, it did. Ding.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Moving on. I was like, don't, but is it the sugar? Is it the? I mean, I don't.
And maybe this is more like a thing
It's
of
not the sugar. I know it's not the sugar.
maybe this is like a thing of its time. I don't know about you. I had not heard. I don't remember hearing mystical properties of
None of
soda.
these. No. I was not familiar with like a single one of them. In fact, they felt like pretty old timey to me.
They did.
Have you heard of this Coca-Cola? It's got cocaine in it. Cocaine can do anything.
Now that would have been
Clean
awesome
a penny.
if they had done kind of like the poppy seed bagel, but get some old Coke and it's like, can you blow a drug test by drinking Coca-Cola? We're never going to be sponsored by Coca-Cola now. I'm sorry.
Why not? Sponsors to do that experiment. I'll volunteer myself to. No, I'll put myself in harm's way. No, I have a bad heart, but I think it just not only was it rapid fire, but again, none of the outcomes were really the only one that they kind of dwelt upon was the one I wanted them to the least, and that was the last one.
Oh,
the meat
yeah.
one. Again, maybe explain to me that somewhere in the world they prepare meat with some other acid that like kind of cooks it, has whatever properties. Why is this a thing does anybody seriously think, have you just dip a little tartar in your Coca-Cola that stuff's cooked now?
Well, I think they were testing for would it corrode? Would it destroy the steak? Is what they were really they made a joke about the marinade, but it was they were testing the corrosive properties.
I thought that they were testing for like whether or not, because they kept looking at it and being like, yeah, it's definitely pink on the inside. So I was like,
You thought they were doing some like America's Test Kitchen?
Yes. I did. I mean, some kind of like chef's table. Like, we're gonna use like acid to cook today.
Mythbusters table.
I mean, Stranger Things. But again, I think that speaks to the fact that like all of these, it's like they were so rapid fire and so like, okay, what are we actually doing?
Yeah.
Like I was already looking at the thing before I understood why we were doing it.
And none of them were like, even the ones that worked, where like cleaning up blood and the polishing chrome, were the only two that they said had any real effect. Even the ones that worked, it was like, okay,
yeah,
good to know. I don't know.
I guess I have to imagine club soda's better for blood, and unless you're arguing like this is superior to something else,
right?
Like, all right, now that's it. It's like, oh, it had like minor effects. Like, would water have the same effect?
And they even do that a couple of times.
Yeah. And
like, oh, that worked.
Definitely cleaner. Like,
when they did
probably stickier.
When they did the microwave myths, which was a lot like this, the difference with that was, one, it's a thing everybody has heard, or at least something I've heard. I don't want to, I don't want to. Maybe there are people going, oh, I've heard all this Coke stuff. It's made sense to me, but it's something that I feel like is more common, and also the results were just more interesting, in my opinion, with the microwave, of like the sparks, or the, hey, you can put metal in a microwave, but here's how that would work. Or,
well,
just
again, there was more like
stuff.
Science. And and that, like you were saying, that one had like an up top explanation of like, quick crash course on a microwave.
Exactly.
It's like, I got it.
And the Jamie building the super microwave or whatever, I feel like this could have been a place to, okay, and I know that they can't disclose the brands, and they actually had some very funny like Greeking and brand neutral products throughout this. I wrote down at one point, they were like, in the polishing chrome, they're like, we're testing cola against a leading chrome cleaner. And it's like, we all know chrome cleaner, right?
Oh, of course.
We've all used that.
Who hasn't grabbed for a bottle of Chrome Cleaner A?
Yes.
Chrome Cleaner A. It will do it.
And also, no jokes about that's what Jamie uses on his head. Come on.
Oh,
come on,
wow.
Adam, you were sleeping on that one.
It was right there. On the job, Mr. Savage.
Right? But yeah.
Me.
Yeah, I just... all of these put together, it was kind of cool. There were moments throughout, but on the whole, none of these were that particularly interesting to me. And then this is what we said, and we'll follow their cue here, but they actually paused and said, we're gonna they put a penny, teeth, and a T-bone steak in the Coke, the one thing I did love was their lab testing rig with the beakers and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was a good visual.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
It goes back to, they are great at making an interesting visual.
Sure.
I did love that. But that's where they go, we're going to leave these for a while and come back.
And I didn't care to. No, I'm serious. It was actually like kind of like after the next myth was done, it was like, have you been wondering? I was like, not for a second. No.
I've been sitting here going, where is the teeth?
Yeah.
Give me the teeth.
Show me
what
a marinating.
I have a drawer of pennies that desperately need to be cleaned. And if I don't know how this...
an ungodly amount of Coca-Cola. I have 2 problems, you understand. 2 birds.
And they could be solved with the same stone.
Show me the stone, sir.
That looks yummy.
Now that's a marinade.
Myth 3, hammer bridge drop. My favorite of this episode.
Words in order.
Yes. Can a falling hammer break your fall when you're jumping into water? And
this is insane.
It is insane. I will say I love the core question in this one. I love this myth, and the reason is, even though as soon as I heard it, I was like, yeah, no, of course that's not going to work. Yeah. But even not knowing the exact science, and they did a better job, I thought, in this, a way better job of talking about surface tension and aeration and all that.
Yes.
Even without having those terms ready at hand, when I heard the myth, I could go, okay, I don't think that's going to work, but I understand the idea that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It was very understandable of okay, I can see why you might think that. And that is an interesting question. I don't think it's going to work, but I do think it's a really interesting question. I could see the science from the beginning, and that I thought was really good. And
show me precisely why this doesn't work.
Exactly.
Don't just wave it off. Show me like this is impossible because X, Y, and Z.
And I thought they did a great job of that in this one. They had way more scientific breakdowns. They had the weird graphic of the bug walking on water. Did you notice that?
I did, and I almost felt like that was the only like Halloween-y thing that they slipped into that one.
Oh,
because, again, with the other with like the testing myth, it's like teeth and rotting flesh. It's like,
man, it's such a good point that this is a Halloween episode. That had not struck me at all, but it's such a good point.
Well, they never say it explicitly, but it just really feels like, I mean, again, like the music changes. It's like shot a little different there are claps of thunder. Like
it makes me wonder, because we know it's weird how at this point in the show, how kind of inconsistent this show is, even within episodes, where this hammer bridge drop, I think, is a really good example of what Mythbusters does well.
Yeah.
They have science and methodology and everything else, and it's in the same episode with the buried alive thing, which doesn't really work at all. It makes me wonder, going back to this is early in the show and, various concerns, like, in TV, it could be that a month before Discovery's like, we need a Halloween special, stat. And it's like, what are we going to do? Bury Jamie in the parking lot. We got you like
bury Jamie and then add those two, because that one's gross. And
exactly. These are the kind of closest things we got. Like, you don't know. There's so many little factors that could play into it. I would love to know. I'd love to know what the show was going through at this moment to see, because it's very strange that it does feel that inconsistent week to week and myth to myth at times.
Sometimes that dissonance works.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have like more of a quiet science-based one, and then like the bang. And I think that that's what they were going for here.
Right.
But I found more bang in the hammer, that was, I mean, especially like high speed breaking the surface of water, cool every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
And maybe that is, why they saved it for last. Maybe that's why they didn't.
But it's not last.
You're right.
We just, the editing really worked against them in this one, because like I strongly would have suggested sandwiching the Coke one in the middle.
Yeah.
And then putting the quote unquote heavy hitters on the bookends.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's a better episode here just with editing, just with different production choices and post-production choices.
That's really
with the
interesting.
same material, you could make a better episode, which is, I mean, that is one of the challenges of documentary type storytelling in general is there isn't a script, and so you're having to make a million different decisions because
There's a lot of content
there's a ton of
to
content
fit into what? I mean, every episode is like 40 minutes
44
and change.
minutes, something like that.
Everything gets like 15, 20 minutes absolute max, you know?
And from what I understand, I know
Days of filming, presumably.
I know Adam has talked about this, and I don't know if this would have been the case at this point in the show, but there were times where they had to produce different links for different markets. So, like,
Fascinating.
if it's going overseas, maybe that channel doesn't have ads. It's like the BBC doesn't necessarily have commercials the same way we do. So that has to be a longer cut. But then the Discovery cut has to be 44 minutes, but then you're going somewhere else, and that's got to be 35.
You don't get to know Jamie's vitals, actually. He's just shirtless for no reason.
We're just going to show you the chest hair. That's all you need.
Fine.
So, I mean, when you're in that scenario too, I'm sure it gets crazy to try to think about, okay, what do we actually need to tell this story?
Yeah.
And also, what's going to be the easiest way to do all those cuts at the same time and have some parity between the different, versions of the show so people are getting a similar experience and like, yeah, all that to say, there's a million different production things that can happen. And so I don't want people to think we're ragging on the show because obviously we love the show. It's just
if
very
anything,
weird to see.
This is the only episode that we've been like, not as much.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty good track record.
At least since the pilot. So like this feels more pilot-y in a way because of some of that, like those struggles that it just felt like, oh, they work. And maybe that's the other thing we're feeling is after the pilots, it was like, we're good. They worked that out. They did it. They figured it out. And then now it's like, it's like maybe not.
All right. It's not quite, we're still learning. We're still learning.
We did get quite a few. What I'm going to consider important first, what I think are big first in the Hammer Bridge drop myth. The first was this. I feel like I know we've seen Buster a couple of times before. This is the first time where he really felt like Buster.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even when Adam first references him in the episode, I noticed he just calls him the dummy. He doesn't even call him Buster. He's been named on the show by this point, but they just say, we'll get the dummy. It wasn't even ingrained for them yet that, this is a character, he's Buster, whatever. I feel like this episode might be the thing that makes him that character.
It might be.
Because he's so important in the episode.
We do get a first posing.
Yes.
This is the first time that Buster's put in an odd pose where, like, he's lifted up on a crane in like crucifix. I was like, wonderful, gentlemen.
And the first time, the whole sequence when they're taking him apart to put the accelerometer, which is another first, and we'll get to that in a second. But that whole sequence again felt like the most involved Buster thing we've seen, where it was like he was really
Buster got an upgrade.
Well, he was really a tool
for
the testing, where in previous episodes it was just like, well, we need something to blow up.
We're gonna do stuff to him.
We're gonna do stuff to him because it's funny.
Yeah.
This was really like,
he's gonna get data off of him.
We're gonna get data. It's gonna be.
He's gonna report back.
This is closer to what he was made for.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
But I mentioned it a second ago. The accelerometer, another first time. Accelerometers, I know about them because of Mythbusters.
Now pay attention, 007.
Yes. Yeah.
This was very Q-esque. Like this is totally. Like they explained it. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna put it in his head. Just cause, like, great.
It's awesome. And they would become, I mean, now people have accelerometers and stuff in their phones, but this is 2003.
Wait, is it true?
Yeah, I believe so. Some phones,
apps?
Have accelerometers and different stuff to measure different things.
Wow.
Not apps that actually like in your phone to help with, movement. Because if you have a phone, like you lift it and certain things happen, you put it down, certain things happen.
Yeah.
I believe it requires an accelerometer to do that. There's going to be some phone
fantastic
scientists listening to me going, you're an idiot. Just watch your...
We have a lot of phone scientists listen to this show.
Honestly, with Mythbusters, it would not surprise me.
Well, let's hope. Welcome, phone scientists.
Welcome, phone scientists.
We're so happy to have you.
Scientist, I should...
It's just one.
Yeah.
It's just one.
Greg, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
We appreciate
we
you.
We love you. It's nice. But yeah, I felt like that was great with Buster, and that the all of those things, it did give me that flavor of like, okay, cool. We are still seeing the show. We're seeing the show come together in a good way,
Right.
not just in the kind of weird, funky ways. I did make a very kind of technical note. And we'll see. I know it's just like, I'm going into research territory here. But the first time they brought Buster out, I just wrote, Buster's got a burn butt.
Yes, he does.
He got a singed ass.
We call that continuity, baby. We call that check issue 3. Was it the 3rd or was it the 4th? Anyway.
Yeah, with the that would be from the cigarette myth, right?
Yes.
Which I think is 4 because he wasn't in the pilots. So
you're right.
we first see him there, but yeah, I mean, this is where we see
that butt was burnt.
This is where we see them rig Buster up and drop him with a quick release. Again, everything just feels, it was like, okay, the show's back. You know, this is what I was excited to see.
I love rigging Buster too. Like it
Right?
weirdly felt like suiting up in like a super suit. It's like, yeah, Buster's ready, man. Buster. Oh my gosh, he fell completely apart.
He exploded.
Yeah, he did explode.
Big time.
They do a little one, and it's like, that looks like that hurts. And then they do him upside down. I was like, nah, well, he's dead.
That's real bad.
And then they do it really high. And it's like, he is shattered.
Before we get to that, I had to make a note of, so in television, especially in classic, like, terrestrial television, one of the most important parts of the show is when you cut to break. What do you leave the audience with? Because sometimes they call it a leave. What do you leave in the audience with to entice them? What's your act break that brings them back? And what they decided to do for this episode wasn't showing Buster lifted high into the sky, or again, this could have been buried alive if they had structured differently. No, their leave was Adam in his underwear. That is what they were so sure was going to entice the viewers at home to come back.
So nice, you got to see it twice, Cliff.
Just to believe it.
Absolutely. I didn't the first time, and then I saw it again. I'm like, I'd buy that.
Yeah, I am glad it came back, unlike shirtless Jamie. It would have been a really weird act break if it was just like, when we come back, Adam in his underwear, and then it's never mentioned again.
I would love that. That's some frisky dingo stuff right there.
Yeah.
I love things that never happen. They're teased, but unless it's a comic book. Superheroes. I wasn't entirely convinced that Jamie even Adam even really needed to get undressed.
Not at all.
Yeah. He was going in like, oh, why is he in there?
Yeah.
What is he testing for?
And get that level of undress too.
Well, and just so public. He's like in the water on a raft or whatever, but like the Golden Gate Bridge is up there.
Well, it's one of those things that I feel like would have become harder to do. Adam's not famous yet.
Fair.
And years later, it would have been like, is that Adam Savage?
Right now, it's just, what is that pasty man doing?
What is that naked redhead doing in the mud?
Doing?
When they get to the harbor, you mentioned this, they drop Buster from 180 feet.
Yeah.
And this is where I know logically that dropping into water at that kind of a height is bad and will kill you.
Oh, sure.
The level of destruction, I was not prepared for.
No.
I found it very surprising. They pull him out of the mud and he just
exploded. He exploded. He was like missing legs and
yeah, they said his leg was cast aluminum and it snapped just from hitting the water. And then apparently it's still somewhere in the San Francisco harbor. They never found it.
Oh, that's great.
At least that's what they lead you to believe in the episode. I don't know.
A little piece of Buster.
Yeah.
Left behind.
Just a fish habitat now. But yeah, I was blown away by how much damage it did. It terrifying.
Was very violent. And especially since like they were kind of trying to drop him, like, doing the thing where you like entering on your feet.
Yeah.
And just none of that worked.
Nope.
That
doesn't matter.
Which that actually made me interested in like, is that a myth? Is there no way to like enter the water from like a super high height that like won't mess you up? Is there like a certain threshold where it's just
what's funny?
Nah, you're dead now.
You know what's funny? I don't know if it's a Mythbusters thing. I know I have seen like a scientific breakdown of high dives, and I don't mean high dives like Olympic high dives. I mean like circus high dive, where they dive from an insane height into very shallow water.
Yeah.
There is a technique to do it. Buster did not know that technique apparently.
No, and
but
it sucks,
there is
'cause
a
you
way
would've-
to do it.
You would have thought that fancy new brain would have kicked in. But no, I just had to accelerate things.
Hey, we know he is made to die in a car.
That's
okay?
true.
He is made to experience pain, so we do not.
And if that car happens to drive off the San Francisco Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, and plummet into the bay, he's prepped for it. He's ready.
They keep doing.
He's made peace with his God. I don't know if that can stay, but I like it fine.
What is the god of crash test dummies? Is there like one great? I mean, wouldn't it be Buster now? He's by far the most recognizable
He's the
crash
prophet,
test dummy.
certainly. I don't know. I like to imagine they just like worship the symbol, like the yellow and black. Like that's just like how they envision. This is the only representation that really gets it.
If anything, it got worse when I tried to deflect it.
No, it did. It did. But he hasn't marked it yet.
They keep doing these tests over and over again, and every time poor Jamie has to lay at like a 45-degree angle on the side of this crane in just a stress position.
Like have to is also such a bold word. Like there are mechanisms they could have put in place to ensure that Jamie did not have to be the one to do it. But,
yeah, I kept thinking about the fact that cranes famously lower.
Oh, they do. Oh, and also, but Cliff, therein we find the Halloween connection. Jamie afraid of height.
Oh,
It's a afraid thing.
This is their Stephen King episode.
This is the Stephen King episode.
Just scaredy things.
It's just all scaredy things all the time.
And this, like we said earlier, partly because of the fact that he was clearly very safe, and partly because of how much more animated Jamie was. This was way funnier. Jamie in panic mode
Did not like it.
so much funnier than it was in Buried Alive.
Because he was actually like in Buried Alive, it's just like, no, looks like I might die. And this, he was like, I have a phobia and I can't help it.
Yeah, Buried Alive, he had accepted it. Here, he was like, I have reasons to live.
Yeah. I have a daughter, damn it. I don't know if that's true.
This is one of the first times we've seen this where, because they lose the leg and we get the great Adam and Jamie each blaming each other, but they have to completely start over, which we haven't really seen before. But they made the right call to do that so that it's consistent across. They said that when on the first test, when Buster hit on his own without the hammer, it was 287 G's of impact. And they said a car crash is around 70.
Oh, so he's not prepared.
No.
Well, that's a shame.
287 Gs. 287 times the force of gravity is insane.
I understand it's like a well-known spot for jumpers, but I didn't know that you would get that badly. I just didn't. Exactly. I don't imagine it as being like that high up. Like, it's like, it's up there, but like not enough to just like, it will explode you actually.
Yeah.
From the bottom up.
Yeah, I always just thought like, oh, you're gonna break your neck, like you're gonna. But I didn't think like limbs ripped off.
Horribly painful. Like in that scenario, it would probably be like you were like exploded just enough to like die horribly drowning. Like, oh. And
I will say, when they do the first test with the hammer, the first result is the hammer is 239 Gs.
Yeah.
And so at the first bash, I was like, I mean, not going to save you, obviously, but I was like, maybe there's actually something a little bit more to this than I thought.
Dispel a little more than.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then they do it over and over again, and the numbers are just all over the place.
Yeah.
Like all the numbers are just inconsistent. And I think what they said when they ran the numbers, there was just no measurable real difference between either one, which is not surprising. But that first test did have me going,
Is it? I was like, no.
Yeah. I did wonder, and this is not even a criticism of this myth, it's just something that got me thinking about was, is there any, obviously there are like aerators that they use for high dives, and there is some truth to this in some aspect, right? Mm-hmm. Specifically though, with dropping something, is there anything to that? Like if you're working on the bridge and you fall off with a beam, and the beam, 1,000-pound beam hits ahead of you, not a 20-pound hammer. Is there any scale at which this could actually feasibly have any effect. I doubt it, and that's probably why it's not worth doing, but it got me thinking about it.
I doubt it specifically because I feel like the size of the thing in order to make enough of an impact would have to be such that you then risk hitting the thing.
You just hit the thing and died
hit the thing and now you're dead on a
different way.
On a girder instead of just the surface. I mean,
yeah. That's a fair point. It's just one thing that came to mind. But this was busted.
I mean, I don't know. Let me be perfectly clear. I cannot say with any kind of confidence that what I just said is
like,
true.
no, I've done it, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. No, I'm very much I'm still confused about how you can jump up when you're on the top of a train and keep going. It's like, that doesn't. No.
Does not compute.
Yeah.
But this one was busted. It felt very thorough. And Adam and Jamie in the wrap-up said exactly what we've been, which is just, I did not expect how much damage the water itself would do. And that was sort of the meat of this one that I thought made it even more worthwhile, was just that was an incredibly surprising result.
Yeah.
I would say that this myth is busted.
I'd agree.
So here we have something unique. It's our first time and the show's first time. We're going back to a previous myth, your other favorite myth, back to Cola territory. I thought they were just going to go straight back into the pennies, teeth, that whole thing. But no, they have actually several other myths, other mini myths that get brought up. Can Cola clean battery terminals? Cola as a grease stain remover? Cola cleaning a greasy engine, so on and so forth, and none of them work. It is just like fail all the way through.
Yeah, and it again. Why do you think right? Who told you this?
Yeah,
where are you pulling this?
Yeah. Why is there a
Did
reason
Jeeves
to
tell
think
you
this would work? It's kind of like.
Did you ask Jeeves?
It's kind of like we talked about this a little bit back with the Pop Rocks and soda, right?
Yeah,
that's another soda myth. But in that one, obviously it's also inherently ridiculous. But again, you can understand the thought process. Oh,
Totally.
Okay, this does create gas, and is that enough gas? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
With all of this, I was just kept thinking, well, why would that work?
Yeah.
Why is it supposed to be good? You're trying to clean something, but you're pouring sugar on it. That seems like a bad idea.
What's counterproductive?
Why is this happening?
Yeah.
Did you notice when they were testing the grease stain remover, two things that I noted. One, their jumpsuits are the same ones from the Running in the Rain. They're still like stained pink, which is great reuse. Can't afford new jumpsuits. We got to use the old ones. But
classics.
then when they're at the table doing the test, the camera widens out and there's just a friggin' snake on the table.
Yes. I
never mentioned
Halloween.
Halloween.
No, I mean, I really, I don't know. But also this was the part where like I knew we were gearing up to the meat. So like I was kind of intentionally trying to like block it out.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't
want to see it.
Don't smell it. Don't, Adam.
Well, that's the other Adam and Jamie, or like Jamie specifically, robot moment. Is Adam is so grossed out by this moldy, desiccated, awful steak, and Jamie's just like, it smells quite good. It smells like food. It's like, what do you eat?
That is sustenance.
Yeah.
Jamie can survive on this.
Stop being such a baby. I was like, what is happening?
Out at the farm.
The steak didn't bother me as much as the tooth.
Really?
The tooth
was gross.
It was awful.
It was very. I was just like supremely aware that it's like that came out of a skull in a way. There was something about that I was just like, ooh. It
was also interesting that like Jamie was like, oh, the tooth that was in just the acid, like half of it has eroded away. And I was like, did you guys measure it? Because Adam was just like, oh, did it? I'll take your word for it and keep going. It was, again, weird use of no science. There's so much of this.
Who is out there just like, I have nothing on hand to dissolve this meat?
Yeah. Or, for all your penny cleaning needs. We all have that, right? We all got pennies that we got to take care of. Like
the Coca-Cola killer. She was putting other victims in drums of Coca-Cola. Nothing happened.
That was the
it did not dissolve.
That was the first draft of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And then they saw the show and were like, gotta change it. Doesn't work.
Doesn't work as well as we thought.
Our bad. Yeah. Well, if you were grossed out by the steak,
Yeah.
the good news is that the last one is spermicide.
Really glossed over too.
Really?
Like everything about the show has led me to believe that they are going to be. And how did we get this sperm? You ask.
No
I was
comment on that.
None whatsoever.
They just cut to two dudes in stained jumpsuits shaking sperm around.
with a control. That one made me.
control,
that one made me giggle when they're like, and some control. I can't say the joke. You know where I'm going with it. A little alliterative action.
They end up even take it to a urologist who had to be like, "Why am I here?" Of course, it doesn't work. And in the end, Harrison's broken. This episode is broken here.
Just imagine going up to a bar and like, give me a C&C. We're spending way more gold than they did. Like, again, they treat this so like perfectly seriously.
They do,
like,
they do, which is surprising.
Very.
It's surprising to me the times where they are incredibly professional and the times where they're just silly children and they don't mesh. They don't line up with anything.
There is something very silly about tacking it on at the tail end.
Yes.
You know? Just
Yeah.
like, and also, we did it with.
I would say if that had been the act break earlier, where it was like we come back spermicide, I would have been like, I'm in. I gotta see what's gonna happen.
Can't wait.
Oh man, the cola conclusion. All the cola really did was clean a couple of things, but it didn't really do
Not
anything
better than something else good.
And they're standing there and they go, cola didn't work. Credits.
That's it. It's a real, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Again, what is going on with this episode?
I don't know
It's so
why.
weirdly put together.
Yeah. It's very, I figured it out just now. Going with the theme.
Our Halloween theme?
It's been Frankenstein.
Mm,
You see?
could well be.
It's
Could
all
well be.
body parts, all stitched together, all kind of wrong.
Yeah,
And because we didn't love it enough, it became a villain. Go read Frankenstein. It's really good.
yeah.
Little Mary Shelley plug for you.
she needs the publicity.
There's this little known author. Only one book so far. So far.
I'm holding out for number 2.
Whew. That and Don McLean's second song. It's coming.
Yeah. All in all, just a weird episode.
Yeah.
Not a total loss. I liked Hammer Drop, but on the whole, probably my least favorite of the season so far.
Yes, but I do recognize that inevitably this episode bought us so much. You know, like, because there's no way that this was not like a pretty highly viewed one.
Probably.
Even if, like, regardless of what you think about it, it is interesting to watch.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
and again, you put the buried alive stuff in a trailer.
Oh, I can see it in my head.
It works all day long.
You know?
So I understand it.
Yeah.
But we will be back next week to see if things improve and see where the season goes from here. Our next episode will be season 1, episode 9. The myths are lightning strikes, tongue piercing, tree cannon, and beat the breath test.
I'm stoked.
These sound great.
They looked great too.
I remember these, and in my mind, these are some great episodes. I'm looking really forward to that.
I'll cop to it. HBO started playing the next one, and I watched the little intro. Like, looks good.
What's this gonna be? So
Spicy.
we hope that all of you will watch as well and come back to hear us break it down. But as always, thank you for listening.
Join us.
We'll be back next week. Try This at Home is produced by Slugline Media. The show was written, hosted, edited, and shot onto the internet by Cliff Bumgardner and Harrison Stewart. Our music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. You can follow the show on Instagram at TryThisPod or email us trythisathomepod@gmail.com.